I never imagined that one of the most surprising and prohibited events of my life would result from a routine task like cleaning the pool. I managed a small but successful shop and tried to keep up some sort of social life while living a nice life in Miami at the age of 36. Daniel, my husband, was frequently gone on business, so I was left to look after our large suburban house. Everything changed during one of these journeys. It had begun like any other Miami sunny day. I chose to spend the afternoon by the pool in an attempt to unwind and read some more because the heat was unbearable. With Daniel's frequent absences and our once passionate marriage now seeming more like a faraway memory, I had been feeling more and more alone lately. I made an effort to ignore those ideas and concentrate on the pleasant wind and warm sun instead. When I heard the rear gate creak open, I was deep in concentration on my book. Our pool cleaner, Mark, was walking toward the pool when I looked up. With a muscular physique, sun-kissed skin, and a boyish charm that won over all the neighbors, Mark was in his late 20s. I never really thought about him after he had been cleaning our pool for a year or so. He was always cordial and competent. He smiled warmly at me and said, "Afternoon, Mrs. Reynolds," his rich blue eyes gleaming in the sunlight. I smiled back and said, "Hey, Mark. Call me Sarah, please. When you say Mrs. Reynolds, I feel elderly." He laughed and put his tools down. "All right, Sarah. How are you?" I shrugged and said, "Oh, same old, same old." "What about you?" He began preparing to clean the pool and remarked, "Can't complain. The summer has been hectic, with numerous pools to maintain. However, I can't gripe about spending my entire day working outside." With practiced ease, he moved around the pool as I watched him get to work. I attempted to return to my reading, but his presence kept me from doing so. Something about his movements and the carefree manner he handled the pool equipment drew my attention. I shook my head, attempting to concentrate on my reading, but my mind kept returning to Mark. Mark eventually stopped working and turned to face me with a light-hearted smile. "Sarah, you're in a terrific place. It must be pleasant to have such a pool." "Yeah, it's fantastic," I replied, putting my book away. "Especially on days such as today." Mark nodded while using the back of his hand to dab at perspiration on his forehead. "It's definitely a hot one." For a while, we engaged in small talk about his other clients and the weather. I discovered that I was enjoying the chat more than I had anticipated, and I was grateful for our easy rapport. I saw Mark occasionally look at me during our conversation, his eyes staying on me for a bit too long. The attention made me feel a little excited, which was something I hadn't felt in a while. "Do you want to have a drink?" I stood up, stretched, and offered. "I have some lemonade in the refrigerator." He gave me another of his endearing smiles and remarked, "Thanks, that sounds great." Taking a moment to collect my thoughts, I walked inside and prepared 2 glasses of lemonade. I told myself I was being ridiculous. There was nothing more to it than Mark being friendly. However, I couldn't help but notice the butterflies of excitement in my tummy as I brought the beverages back outside. Our fingers touched as I gave Mark the lemonade, and I was startled by a sudden electrical shock. His attitude momentarily changed to one of intensity and seriousness as he gazed at me. Then, as if nothing had happened, he took a sip of the lemonade and smiled. With a casual tone, he said, "Thanks, Sarah. This is ideal." I tried to ignore my rushing heart as I said, "You're welcome." Taking a sip of my own drink, I sat down again and watched Mark work. However, I couldn't get rid of the impression that something had changed between us, a subtle shift that I couldn't quite identify. As the afternoon went on, I noticed that I was looking at Mark more and more while my mind kept going in inappropriate directions. The temptation was getting stronger by the minute, despite my best efforts to convince myself that I was married and that this was merely harmless flirtation. Then, with a sly smile, Mark turned to face me as he was finishing up. Even though I've been cleaning pools for a while, I've never really had the opportunity to enjoy one of them." Amused, I arched an eyebrow. "Oh, really? So, if you want to, feel free to go for a swim." After a little pause, he shrugged and put his stuff down. "Why not? It's too hot to avoid it. He immediately undressed to his swim trunks, and I was struck by how fit, self-assured, and relaxed he appeared. With a light-hearted splash, he surfaced from the pool, sending water tumbling over the side. With a playful tone, he said, "Come on in. The water is ideal." I shook my head and laughed. "I don't believe so. Right now, I'm doing well." He responded, floating languidly on his back, "Suit yourself. You're missing out, though." For a minute, I felt the attraction of the moment and the draw of the water as I observed him. I hadn't done something impulsive or for myself in such a long time. After a moment of hesitation, I decided. I mumbled, "What the hell?" as I got to my feet and removed my disguise. Before I had a chance to second-guess myself, I was already in my bikini and dove into the pool, where the cool water quickly surrounded me. Mark had his eyes flashing with mischief and was smiling at me when I surfaced. "There you have it. You would give in, I knew." Playfully, I splashed him, and he splashed back, making me chuckle. We were carefree for a little while, playing and splashing in the water like children. I allowed myself to lose myself in the moment, and it felt good, better than I had anticipated. However, the tension between us reappeared as the playfulness subsided. As our eyes met, the laughter subsided and we drifted closer to one another. The distance between us was getting less by the second, and I could feel my heart thumping in my chest. Mark murmured, "Sarah," in a quiet voice that carried an emotion I couldn't quite put my finger on. "You know that I've always found you to be beautiful?" My breath caught in my throat as I took a deep drink. "Mark, I..." He extended his hand and touched my arm, causing a chill to go through me. His voice was low and full of longing as he muttered, "You don't have to say anything. I simply..." It's something I've wanted to say for a while. I realized I needed to back off and stop this before it got out of hand. In actuality, though, I didn't want to. Mark was staring at me as if I were the only person in the world, and it had been a long time since anyone had done that. Before I could stop myself, I drew closer to him and gave him a hesitant, gentle kiss. Even though it was only a quick contact, it was enough to give me a shock of electricity. We were both breathing deeply and pressing our foreheads into one another when we pulled apart. "This is insane," I muttered, my voice shaking. "This is not possible." "I understand," Mark said, looking into my eyes. "I don't want to stop, though." I didn't either. But as the truth of what we were doing set in, I realized that I couldn't go over that line, not entirely. "We must," I responded, stepping back. "Mark, I'm married. Daniel cannot be subjected to this." Mark nodded, regret visible on his face. "Sarah, I apologize. I didn't intend to, I simply..." "It's all right," I broke off, my heart hurting. I don't understand. I have no idea what I'm doing." The moment was over, but the tension persisted as we swam to opposite ends of the pool. Wrapping myself in a towel and attempting to calm my pounding heart, I crawled out of the water. Mark did the same, gathering his belongings and making his way to the gate. He avoided looking at me and replied, "I should go. I apologize if I caused any awkwardness." "It's not your fault," I said, hardly raising my voice above a whisper. I've got to work things out." Mark gave me a tiny, dejected smile as he nodded. "Be careful, Sarah." I was overcome with remorse, bewilderment, and a sharp sense of longing as he departed. I was aware that I had gone too far, even if only momentarily, and I was at a loss for how to interpret it. I replayed the incident in my head for the remainder of the day, wondering what it meant and what I should do about it. The days that followed were tense and uncertain. I kept thinking about Mark and how he had made me feel visible, wanted, and alive. However, I was also unable to deny the guilt that tore at me whenever I remembered Daniel and the vows we had made to one another. Then I got a text from Mark a week later. "Hello, Sarah, I am aware that the past time was strange. I wanted to see how you were doing and to check in. I just wanted to make sure you were all right, no pressure. My heart was pounding as I gazed at the letter. I was aware that I should try to forget about it, go on, and ignore it. However, the allure remained, the temptation too great to ignore. I responded back, and I'm okay. Merely attempting to solve the problem. How are you? He answered in a flash. I'm doing fine. Just been giving you a lot of thought. I miss our conversations. I paused, a flurry of contradictory ideas racing through my head. I was aware that I was treading carefully and that this was risky. But I was powerless to stop myself. I also miss our conversations. As if nothing had changed, the discussion flowed naturally as we kept messaging. Even though it was only via a screen, it was good to speak with him and rekindle that connection. But as the days passed, I realized that there might be repercussions if we continued. Then I got a text from Mark one afternoon. Tomorrow, I will be in your vicinity. Do you want to get coffee? My heart was racing as I gazed at the message. I was aware that I needed to say no, maintain my distance, and concentrate on my marriage. However, the draw was too strong and the temptation too enormous. Yes. Let's get started. We got together at a tiny cafe where no one would know us. Mark was seated at a corner table with a coffee in front of him when I entered. A flutter of nerves ran through my stomach as he looked up and smiled at me. I got into the seat across from him and said, "Hey. How are things going?" "Good," he said, examining me with his gaze. "I'm happy you came." For a while, we avoided the elephant in the room and caught up on the previous week through small chat. However, the tension between us was evident and the topic of conversation quickly changed. "Sarah," Mark remarked abruptly and gravely. "I can't get the events out of my head. About us." With my heart pounding, I glanced down at my coffee. "I'm at a loss for words, Mark. I have a spouse. We can't. I can't." "I understand," he broke off, regret shining in his eyes. "However, I can't act as though I don't have feelings for you. I've attempted, but failed, to ignore it." A mixture of longing and remorse swirled inside me as tears pricked at my eyes. I said, without raising my voice above a whisper, "I feel it too. However, this is rather difficult. I don't wish to cause harm to anyone." Mark gently reached across the table to grab my hand and said, "We don't have to do anything you're not ready for. But I must express my feelings to you. Sarah, I don't want to lose you." My thoughts were racing as I squeezed his hand. I was aware that I was taking a huge risk and that this was perilous. In actuality, though, I also didn't want to lose him. Tears streaming down my face, I muttered, "I don't know what to do. I don't understand." Mark got up and drew me into a soft embrace. "We'll work it out," he murmured quietly. "With each other." And I believed him at that very instant. I had no idea what was ahead or how we would deal with the intricacies of our emotions. However, I experienced optimism for the first time in a long time, the hope that perhaps, just possibly, I could find my way back to happiness.